with America's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Thank you for joining us on a very busy Thursday evening with America's Mayor. Let's start off, Mayor, with opening thoughts.
Opening thoughts have to be today about two things. One is the FTX massive scandal. Still don't know the dimensions of it, but it's in the multi-billions of dollars. The real issue here is people who have lost enormous amounts of money. And it's going to turn out, very ironically, a lot of it was to fund the past election. There's a suggestion that he funded both parties. Actually, his partner funded the Republican Party, but the balance of payments was Republicans would have come out much better if they gave no money, none to Republicans, none to Democrats. The vast, overwhelming majority of money went to the Democrat Party. And not only that, but he was the second largest contributor to the Democrat Party, the largest one being George Soros. So he's in very bad company. The guy is a darling of the left, and it is actually extraordinary when you look at this article in The Guardian, which is a British left-wing rag. Sam Bankman-Fried was one of the good guys of crypto. Huh. He was what everyone wanted a crypto billionaire to be. I don't know about you. I don't think I wanted him to be like this. He's young. He's a visionary because he makes money to donate to good causes. He's a genius. He doesn't sound like much of a genius now, does he? I guess he'll be the smartest guy in federal prison if the Democrats don't let him get away with it. And now, why is he a good guy? This is what he does that's good. This has got to tell you everything you need to know about this rag of a paper, The Guardian, and all of them, really. This is why they all liked him. He tried to use his money to improve the world. What did he do? Try to figure out how to deal with poverty? Or He promised $1 billion to the Democrat Party. And he committed to donating vast amounts of his fortune to the effective altruism movement. In other words, he was going to give his money to left-wing activists, socialists, communists, who have never done anything for the poor but make them poorer. And he was going to do it out of the goodness of his heart because he wanted them to overlook the massive amount of cheating he was doing. He wanted them to invest, and people who invest in his fund, even though he had the main one in the Bahamas. And the regulators, to the extent there are any regulators, went soft on him because he made such heavy contributions to the Democrat Party. He was sitting down with the SEC and telling them what the regulations should be. In other words, he was writing the regulations for himself, and he turns out to probably be the biggest massive crook so far uncovered in this industry. And it's not unusual that he would donate. He'd be the second biggest contributor to the Democrat Party. And most of it went to the Democrat Party at the top. I mean, he must feel very comfortable with them. They're a bunch of crooks, too. So crooks like crooks and protect each other. Figures they're not going to come after me. Look at all the stealing Biden did. Look at all the stealing the Clintons did. Oh, we'll find out about Pelosi now that she's left. Let her have a day where people actually think she's praying for everybody, and she's really just a good old Italian woman praying for everyone. She always prayed for Trump. Maybe the problem was that it never did any good. Maybe when Nancy offered a prayer to God, he said, "Gee, Nancy, what about all those hundreds of thousands of lives? Particularly the ones at 6, 7, and 8 months in the womb that you enthusiastically support killing." Could be. If the Catholic Church is right, that would be the response, wouldn't it? The Catholic Church could be right, couldn't it? No, I can't. No. Only the left-wing Marxist ideologues are right. Nobody else can be right about the beginning of human life. Well, this is going to be a hell of a scandal unless one of the people involved in this is a Biden, in which case, that's what will happen to it. See? That's what they had to do in Ukraine. Which gets me to Ukraine. So I've been reluctant to pull this together because I love the Ukrainian people. I have a special affection for them. I spent time in Ukraine long before any of the bad things happened. I have 2 godchildren who are Ukrainian American. I know about Ukraine from personal friends way back during the time of the revolution from communism. And I was there under much better circumstances, although from the first time I went there, I was warned by none other than Henry Kissinger and John McCain and Colin Powell that it was a highly corrupt country and to be very careful about anyone you dealt with. And at that time, I distinctly remember the briefing said there was only one honest man in Ukraine, and it was Yanushchenko, who was running for president against Yanukovych. Yanushchenko represented the eastern part of Ukraine, which is European, and Yanukovych represented the Russian part, the more Russian part of. And they were going to have a free election because the president Kuzma wasn't running for re-election, although he tried to get a 3rd term, like they all do. But he was alleged, never proven, to have had the head of a journalist, Ukrainian, chopped off because he was critical of him. He was also alleged to have taken a fortune in bribes and money, and which is almost expected of a leader of Ukraine. The reports back at that time, all of the intelligence reports were unremitting in their criticism of Ukraine as being one of the most corrupt countries in the world, on a par with, or in some ways even more avarice exists there. And they have skills that are better than the Russians in some ways. They're masterful money launderers. And that's important to keep in mind. Their skill at money laundering is at least equal, if not superior, to the Russians. And money laundering played a big part in the Biden case. There's one transaction that's on paper, only not acknowledged because of the fact that the American press and media are accomplices with Biden in his crime. They cover it up. But the document shows $3 million plus being laundered through Ukraine. Now, the reason I mention that is everyone asks me, is Zelensky like that? I was told everyone in Ukraine is corrupt. Did I find that everyone in Ukraine is corrupt? No, of course not. Not everyone in Ukraine is corrupt. It has a very high level of corruption. Mexico does too. So I don't know how you compare those two. The Ukrainian corruption is at a higher level, but the Mexican corruption has now really moved to a higher level with all of the gangs that they have now that really are very sophisticated organized crime groups. Zelensky, as far as I know, has a honest background in the sense that he was a lawyer, he decided to be an actor, and he did a hit comedy show, in which he played a prime minister who had to deal with all these corrupt oligarchs. Sounds like he played himself, what he's going through. But this is what you need to know. The owner of that station is one of the top crookedest people in Russia, in Ukraine, or in Russia combined. Last name is Kolomoisky. He owns the station. He gave Zelensky his start, and they were very close. Close enough that upon Zelensky's election, he returned from exile, self-imposed exile, in actually he was in Israel for a while. And he was thrown out because of his criminal background. He was thrown out of Israel. His major crime was he ran the bank that did the money laundering, called the Privat Bank. And he did it for everyone, friend and foe alike, for money. And people used him because he was so good. And the laundered payment that we have the solid evidence for on paper comes through the Privat Bank. There are witnesses, and one in particular in Ukraine, passed up by the FBI, that was willing to explain all the other offshore accounts, turn over the codes of the money that was given to the Bidens. That is in excess of the 8 million that you can count through the hard drive. We don't know how much more in excess. But she was willing to testify. This information was given to the FBI in January of 2020. It was given actually to the U.S. Attorney in Pittsburgh and the FBI agents there. They were quite anxious to follow up on it, particularly when we told them that there were threats to kill her. They even called again for further information about her, but she never received a call, at least not up until the time we stopped hearing from her. And we pray to God that she's still alive. But she was a woman with a woman who you couldn't just brush off her evidence. She was in a position, if they were using offshore bank accounts, she was in the prime position to know that. So she wasn't making up information about things she didn't know. She also was at a very high level. And I can't say much more about her. I'm sure that they know who she is, meaning the Bidens and their organized crime patron. How is it that I'm even talking about the fact that a high-level member of Ukrainian organized crime was paying millions of dollars to the son of the vice president, the secretary, and the stepson of the Secretary of State? Doesn't that have to tell you all you need to know about the Obama administration, how crooked it was? Do I need to tell you any more? I told you that before the hard drive. You just didn't believe me. The hard drive proves it. And they kept the hard drive from you. And they convinced a whole bunch of you that I'm a Russian agent. All I was an American who brought out the biggest scandal in American history. And for that, I'm being tortured by the left wing. Because the biggest scandal in American history happens to have been done by their group. Well, if it was done by the other group, I'd do the same thing, but they wouldn't. Because they're not patriots. Because they do not put the country first. They put their ideology first. They put their desire for power first. They put their desire for money first. And I don't do any of those things. I wasn't built that way. I think that's what the Southern District found out, that their former boss, who was probably by far their most successful boss in terms of bringing cases. It's hard to figure out who you're going to compare the number of cases that I brought successfully and the impact I had on society when I was U.S. Attorney. And there's a man on today who was discussing the carding industry and thanking me for having taken the Mafia out of it so that we can have private carding in New York, which is a massive billion-dollar business, by the way.
How many members of the Mafia did you put behind bars, Mayor?
A couple hundred in America, about 800 in Italy.
800 in Italy?
Yeah, well, we helped to, I shouldn't say that I did. I should say, as they should say, they did the 200 in the United States. I jointly investigated it with the Italian government. I actually had Italian magistrates and investigated in my office, working on the cases together, and then we sent some people to Italy to work on their cases because we found that it was much more effective. There was one particular witness, Buscetta, who we both had claims for, and I went to Italy and spent 7 days negotiating how we would divide him up because the Italian government wanted them first. We wanted them first. You always like to get them first before they get run down by cross-examination. And we got him first. We got him. And he was used in a number, not only the commission trial, but then what we call the family RICO cases, in which we went after each family individually to clean them out. Because the real purpose of RICO, not only putting them in jails for 100 years, which is damn good, but you take their money. So we took their resources away from them. So they couldn't live on as the big, giant enterprise they were. And then specific resources that you would know that we took from them were the Teamsters Union, Las Vegas, the karting industry, the garment industry, the fish market, others.
The commission is the what is known.
Well, there are two commissions. One is much more active than the other.
Talking about the Mafia.
The Mafia Commission in New York is the most powerful commission in the country, and it is made up of 5 families. It was put together in the early 30s by Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. And they put it together after having assassinated the 2 competing bosses of the Mafia on a weekend. They did one on a Friday and one on a Sunday. One of them in a famous restaurant at Coney Island, if you ever want to go there. And when those 2 bosses were dead, between Lansky and Lucky Luciano, they came up with the idea: why all this fighting? Let's take each one of the 5 families, let them meet once a month, and settle their disputes. And as a result of that, Luciano became really the first acknowledged boss of bosses. Lucky ran it, but then he was prosecuted, convicted, and sent to jail by Tom Dewey, who ran for president twice against Roosevelt and Truman. The
famous headline: Dewey beats Truman, even though it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So back to you.
But Dewey came to fame by prosecuting the mob, and particularly Lucky Luciano. And then during the war, they let Lucky Luciano out of jail to go to Italy and
World War II.
Yeah, and fight the Nazis, which he did, and which he was successful at. So that when we invaded Italy, we didn't have to invade Sicily. He cut off Sicily, and he also assisted in a good part of making the march through southern Italy much, much easier, because the Mafia controlled that territory more effectively than the Nazis could never quite overcome the Mafia, and the Mafia never liked the Nazis.
So Sicily was kept its independence at the time from...
Well, no, it wasn't independent. It was part of Italy, but it kept its independence from...
Mussolini and what was happening.
Yeah, they had no use for Mussolini either. Well, they wanted to run the Italy. This is not a credit to them. It's just a credit to us in figuring out sometimes you got to work. Look, we were working with a bigger killer than the Mafia. We were working with Stalin, right? And Stalin, I mean, the Mafia is a small killer compared to the present Chinese Communist Party that Biden has just been sucking up to and taking money from. And Stalin, who became Roosevelt's best friend. And when Roosevelt lost his mind, Roosevelt gave away Eastern Europe to him with Churchill's strong objection. That's why it's not good to have presidents who have half a brain.
And we want to get back to this, but Mayor, we were talking about some of your crime-fighting days in the city and the commission. People here, a lot of them might remember this trial. It's well known, it's cited a lot, so we're coming back to this. You are credited with basically putting together a legal pathway to taking down this organized criminal enterprise that had so much control over the city.
Over the country.
Over the country.
Yeah. I mean, I devised it. I was the Associate Attorney General of the United States, worked for President Ronald Reagan. And when I asked for the job of U.S. Attorney, I got confirmed. And in the time between that and going to New York, I set up my plans for doing it. Then I spent 3 months organizing it in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I went to visit the Attorney General, my former boss, William French Smith, and also the Deputy Attorney General, Ed Schmoltz, and Judge Webster, who was the head of the FBI. And I brought a big chart with me. You know, I love charts. You see it when I do it on whiteboards, and I laid out all of the family, what we had on them, how we were partially there with regard to the 5 families, but we needed a lot more evidence. And I showed them the gaps that we had. And I said, a lot of those gaps are going to be filled in by surveillance. And I'd like you to assign to me, and this is, I don't know if anyone ever requested this before, but I'd like you to assign to me some agents from the intelligence division, because although the agents from the criminal division are terrific at doing criminal cases, nobody's better at breaking in than the intelligence division. They're as good as any New York burglar. And by the way, they broke in New York more than any place else because there was a big there were many communist cells in New York, probably New York and Los Angeles. I mean, middle of the country is too patriotic to have communists. It's only the coast that have the people who hate America. Yeah. You ever get that? Hating America? I never got it. Here we are fighting to keep a border because people are crashing down like crazy to come here. And then we get all these speeches from the lefties about how horrible and terrible and awful and we're systemically racist and we hate poor people. And of course, that isn't true because all the people giving it to us are multimillionaires who have made money off the poverty industry. They're all some kind of poverty pimps of some kind or another.
Thanks for joining us, America's Mayor Live, with America's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. We are coming to you live with lots of questions coming in. Let us know who you are and where you're tuning in from. So your name and where you're tuning in from, and the mayor will hear some of them. And then, of course, we'll read some that we don't get to here on the air. And visit rudygiulianics.com to listen to all of the mayor's podcasts. That's rudygiulianics.com. And Mayor, what does the CS stand for?
Common sense.
And we also sign up for our Facebook page, YouTube, Twitter, and be sure to tune in weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern for the live stream, and go to WABCRadio.com for the mayor's live radio show on WABC Radio. That's at 3 p.m. weekdays. And any other announcements that we have for the show. Rumble! Sign up for the mayor's Rumble page. Go to Rumble and sign up. We're going to start streaming from there real shortly.
There's a podcast on there right now that is introduced largely because it's going to set up the next podcast, and it is questioning Biden's cognitive decline, and particularly as a result of the fool that he made out of himself. And unfortunately, America, when he didn't know, he was talking to the Cambodian prime minister. He thought he was talking to the Colombian prime minister, even though he had made the same mistake before. And then you don't know all the rest of the things that he did there that were really, really embarrassing. So that unless these world leaders are all, blind, brainwashed, Democrat, obsessive, silly people, they know he has dementia. They know it. I mean, these are intelligent people. These are not people like we just push around and brainwash in the United States and keep the information from them. Watch them walk and you can see there's something wrong. Watch them talking, you know for sure. So I published today that analysis done by 2 excellent doctors in 2020, warning you not to vote for him unless he got a real check, because they were convinced, one, absolutely, that he was in far stages of dementia, and the other that it looked like he was at mid-level dementia, but he definitely had dementia. Well, that's, a couple of years ago. Dementia is progressive, gets worse, and it's gotten worse. And I'll demonstrate in the second podcast. First podcast will take you back and remind you never should have voted for him in the first place. This is the guy who, couldn't remember that. So I saw Roosevelt reading the newspapers on television. Well, that has to be a delusion. The television wasn't there when Roosevelt was alive. Or he would say things like, he was in the Senate I was in the Senate for 120 years, or I'm running for the Senate. Or even back then, he was referring to Kamala Harris as a candidate for president. he now refers to as President Harris, and the other day asked her, was it a tough job? Now, if that's not out of it, bonkers, nothing is. And you still have him. And you don't see a single profile in courage in that cabinet, do you? Because America means nothing to these people. They have no love for this country. If you love this country, you wouldn't sit there at a cabinet meeting, even with the guy that appointed you, and watch this guy slobbering all over the language and blah, 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 blah. Half the time he mumbles. He can't articulate, which they will explain to you is a significant sign of dementia.
Thanks for joining us, and we are getting questions, Mayor. One question we saw, getting back to the FTX scandal, is what kind of liability some of these celebrities could face if they, of course, pushed the FTX cryptocurrency market to the general public, and if they knew about kind of what was happening.
Well, if they knew about what happened, they face criminal and civil liability. And the civil liability is almost assured if they had knowledge. It's not. It's worse than that, though, because if they were negligent in finding out, that may well be enough to recover from them. And there are signs here that, for example, if I were representing the people suing, I'd want to investigate exactly how they thought this thing was legitimate, and they had an office in the Bahamas. They had an exchange in the Bahamas. That's typical of money laundering. It's typical of escaping American regulatory practices for the shady transactions you're involved in. It's typical for hiding names of people who were involved, who might be very bad people. I can't think of a reason why you put it in the Bahamas other than for some reason that makes the investment one you shouldn't make. You certainly have, by investing in something in the Bahamas, you have given that institution the ability to avoid the regulations that exist in the United States to protect investors. So why would someone who's running an above-board financial institution want to have the option of being in a place where he can avoid American regulations? Having been a prosecutor of securities crimes, people forget that. I would say that's a 9 out of 10 chance because he's a cheat. Now, this guy looked also like there was something wrong with him. If the guy would shake like crazy when he was being interviewed. The one time I saw him, I thought he was kind of a little freaky. Why you would give money to a freak, I don't know why you would do that either. So there are a lot of signposts. So why are those important? Those are important because when they get sued, let's say they sue Brady, right? Because he got up and sold this to people. Those people may now be bankrupt. They're going to be pretty angry at him. Or that other guy that I never liked him, the sarcastic
Larry David.
Yeah. Oh God, I never thought he was even funny. He's so nasty. He's the kind of guy that I probably would get in trouble with. The first thing he said, I'd probably punch him in the mouth and knock him down. But in any event, luckily, I've never had to meet him, and he's of course a crazy Democrat, as most of them are. Crazy man who did all this is a crazy Democrat. Virtually helped elect the Senate. He gave you the Senate.
Tens of millions, if not.
Yeah, tens of millions, and who knows how much really. And they tossed a few bucks to McConnell, who was, McConnell take from anybody. What a disgrace, re-electing him. You want me to criticize my own party? We want to stay we want to stay back where we basically were content to just take the droppings that Democrats left. That's what the crooks do in Albany. The Democrats make the big money in Albany, and the Republicans are happy to just take the crumbs.
Thanks for joining us. One question we're getting, Mayor. What do you want to see out of this new House? Republicans taking control. What would you like to see out of the new Republican-controlled House of Representatives?
Keep your promises. You made very specific promises to the American people, I think particularly to conservatives. Really conduct those investigations and conduct them honestly and fairly, not like the Nazis on the other side, because that's the way they conduct it, like Nazis or communists. Get rid of the January 6th committee. It's totally illegitimate. Pass a resolution of the House that the Democratic National Committee should pay all the expenses of the January 6th committee, because all it ever was a partisan political committee made up of the qualification for being a member of the January 6th committee is you have to have lied about Russian collusion. You have to have at least one lie on your record. It's like joining the Mafia. You got to kill somebody. And most of them were multiple liars, big-time liars, only not really exposed because the media is just as corrupt as they are. But you take Shifty Schiff. How many times has he lied to you? Well, why would you put him on the January 6th committee? Also, you think you're going to get an open-minded consideration of the facts for the people she put on there? These are all people that hated Trump. So the January 6th committee is an abomination. It's a partisan political exercise. So I'd like to see the House present the bill of 20 or 30 million to the Democratic National Committee as a partisan political expense. And ethics charges being brought against the people who formed it for forming a partisan political committee. And also see if you can't get some of those people out of jail who've been sitting there for 16, 17 months and they're charged with trespass. How about we get them out, since God knows in democratic cities they let men who beat the hell out of women out. We just had one in New York who was let out and then went and killed her. I mean, I can't believe anybody sitting there in that 17, 18-month confinement did anything as bad as that. By the way, they weren't the ones who killed Ashley Babbitt. The one murder that took place that day, we can't even get the records of. We're not allowed to see what happened. And you know why we're not allowed to see what happened, because you know what happened. Been demonstrated on tape many times. They don't even have the decency to make some kind of a token attempt to investigate that. What, is her life worthless? I mean, the people that were killed, that caused riots, were committing crimes. And then the police sometimes acted improperly in dealing with in reacting to those crimes, or sometimes acted properly and it was just deliberately falsified. You had both happening. But in every case, they were committing crimes. That doesn't mean they deserve to be killed. But it meant that it deserved a very good investigation. Well, what about Ashley Babbitt? First of all, we don't know whether she was committing a crime. We don't have any picture of her breaking it, as far as I know. We got a picture of a lot of people breaking in, the FBI let go, who were rats for them, who were their plants, like John Sullivan, who took the film there. John Sullivan announced the day before, burn down the Capitol. John Sullivan has several texts in which he invites Antifa members to come and disrupt the rally. John Sullivan is on tape telling people to smash windows, break things in the Capitol. He was held for 4 hours, and I saw him that night when he was out. And they asked me, my colleagues asked me, how did he get it? I said, well, he's obviously an FBI rat. And by the way, he has a prior charge for incitement to riot that led to murder in Utah. So he's a two-time loser, and they let him out. So this thing is completely unfair, and it's a creature of the House. The House is now Republican. I get rid of it, and I make the Democrats pay for it.
Thanks for joining us. We're with America's Mayor Live with America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani. We have lots of questions coming in, Mayor, on the FTX scandal. Do you think did it surprise you, the timing, that this all kind of collapsed right after the election? Do you think that had anything to do with making sure that the election went through and the money was good? Right, the money, the checks had to clear.
I am sure that he did everything he could and probably had got some help. It'd be interesting to find out who to hold this off until after the election. No doubt about it. Just like my letter saying that all the cases were dropped or weren't going to go forward was leaked, that they had come to this conclusion 4 weeks ago. So that letter could have been sent 4 weeks ago, and it was sent after the election. Now, maybe I'm reading too much into that, but with all of these things being politicized, and my knowing from the very beginning I didn't commit a crime, Do you know how frustrating and how upsetting it is to be investigated when you didn't commit a crime and thinking about, well, who's going to lie about me? It's one of the reasons I defended Donald Trump is because I knew he hadn't been involved in any kind of collusion with the Russians, and I couldn't understand how you deal with the fact that people are chasing after you and trying to get you for something you didn't do. In my case, they had all my records for at least a year before they raided my house. They had all of my records that are in the iCloud, which is basically what they took a second time, because they took my electronics, and that's basically my electronics are Apple. And so they already knew what was in there, which was nothing. So they were just hoping they could find something extra. So I'm very interested in knowing what probable cause they had for getting my iCloud. Number two, for raiding my house and law office, and then not having enough probable cause to indict me. See, that's the standard for indictment, which should give you an idea that what a weak, how they underperformed in finding anything. So I don't know what to make of it. But I am going to seek an explanation for who lied to them to get the search warrants that turned out to not produce evidence enough to reach probable cause. It has to be somebody lied to them. I have a pretty good idea in the second case. I'm rather confused about the very first one, where they went after my records from the day that I began representing Donald Trump. I also think that's something to note. It's not a coincidence that they started going after me and invading my privacy, both as a person and a lawyer, from the day that I began representing Donald Trump. Is it possible to be a partisan even on the other side and recognize that they have targeted Donald Trump to persecute him and to destroy him by any means possible? The mere fact they haven't been able to put a criminal case against him in 4 years of intense investigating tells you whatever they find is going to be garbage. And the risk at this point of lying is tremendous. Tremendous. The longer you carry on these Javert-like pursuits of people, you create all kinds of incentives with bad people into lying. That's why I was always very, very sensitive to that. I never had an investigation that took 4 or 5 years. You do it quickly. Anytime these investigations linger, a lot of things happen. That people are inclined to lie. Prosecutors and FBI agents are almost required to justify themselves. So they bring some kind of charge. What were they doing for 4 years? Right? Well, are they stupid? What were you doing? You didn't know in advance that you weren't going to make a case. You didn't know before 3 years ago you weren't going to make a case. You're wasting the resources of the United States government when we got criminals running around like crazy on a case. And in this particular case, the guy was willing to come in and talk to you the day you did it. And you never would do that until the very end. Go ahead.
Thanks for joining us, America's Mayor Live, with America's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Please visit rudygiulianics.com. Check out all of his podcasts. That's rudygiulianics.com. And Mayor, what does the CS stand for?
Common sense.
Where are some of the people on there from?
Let us know who you are and where you're tuning in from. Give us your name and location. We'll read some off to the mayor here, as we have just 20 minutes left. The first one on here, Mayor, William from Melbourne, Australia.
Ooh, another Aussie.
Hello, William. As we look back here, we can see a lot of these come in at a very rapid pace. So let us know where you're calling in from. New York, Dylan from New York. Mike is in Ohio.
Any questions from?
Ask us some questions. We have Tennessee, Southwest Idaho, East Tennessee. Rob has a question. What is Rob asking us? Rob from Sea Caucus.
Oh.
Friend.
Our friend Rob. Rob, what question do you have? You're giving us some good comments. We have Carl in Michigan. Maine checking in.
What about the other one right here that's going crazy? This phone right here on the left is going crazy.
We have our audience here on Getter. Lots of folks checking in from Illinois, Texas, and elsewhere. What questions do we have for the mayor? Ask questions, we'll read them off to the mayor. Will the new Congress investigate? So the question is, Mayor, what sort of investigations do you want to see out of the new Congress
Well,
when it
I'm
comes?
going to play something for you, which tells you it's a lot different. This is Representative James Comer. Sounds like he just can't wait to get started, and he's going after a deal that he's got all the evidence of it. I'm sure he has them. If he needs any, I have it sitting in my room, two doors away. But this. I can tell you that what he's saying here is not an allegation. I've read these records, and he will be able to convict them from their own texts. Let's listen to it.
Americans are suffering from high energy prices because of this administration's terrible energy policy. We find evidence that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden were involved in a scheme to try to get China to buy liquefied natural gas, and from a whistleblower to try to get their foot in the door with China starting to purchase an interest in natural gas drillers. The people are in outrage over China buying farmland in the Dakotas. What about China starting to buy into our American energy industry at a time when we have an energy crisis?
So I hope you can hear that, but you can see that no Democrat congressman ever done that. First of all, this cries out for investigation. This is the Bidens doing business with our biggest enemy that wants to destroy us, that has built a navy bigger than ours, that's building an army to kill us. And our president and his family. I won't even characterize what this is. Has taken multiple millions of dollars from high-level Chinese communists. One of them described as the spy master of China by Hunter Biden, not by me, by Hunter Biden. Well, this is an oil transaction in which they were going to siphon off American oil and sell it to China. Also, using Biden's ban on drilling and selling it in the United States. I don't think, if this all comes out, the American people can handle how crooked the Biden family is. I really don't think you can imagine. But this is just one of many transactions. There was the $30 million deal contract where Joe would get his usual 50%, so that's 15 million, plus an additional 10 to the big guy. I'm sure that one I know they have cold. This one they have cold with all the documents. Oh, and by the way, for the longest time, I don't know when it ended, but for the longest time, and during the period we're talking about here, one of the partners that was going to benefit from this, and you're just going to think I'm making this up, was Whitey Bulger's nephew. Whitey Bulger was one of the sought-after organized criminals in the country for many, many years. And in fact, this was another FBI scandal. He was an informant. He was an informant against certain people, particularly the Mafia people, but the ones he could get away with. And because he was an informant and gave some cases to the FBI, they overlooked his murders. This happened under a U.S. attorney named Mueller.
Good story.
Thanks for joining us, America's Mayor Live with America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani. One question we got here that's kind of scrolled past us, Mayor. Case that you're most proud to be a part of. Successful case.
I think I don't know. I think maybe the extradition of the Nazis, because they're pure evil.
What did you do there?
Mayakovsky's. I tried the case myself. I argued the case in the Court of Appeals. It was they disputed being extradited to in those days the Soviet Union, because the crime was committed in Latvia, and the crime was committed in Estonia. At the time, they was at the time I was doing the extradition, they were part of the Soviet Union, and they had escaped. They were both commandants of concentration camps. One killed 12 million people, the other 20. I say 12 million? I'm sorry, 12,000 people, and the other killed 20,000 people. There were numerous witnesses, documents, pictures. So there was a law that allowed you to prosecute them no matter how long. Another statute of limitations was waived by Congress. And they were both caught, they were both tried. And in one case, it became very, very controversial because Pat Buchanan opposed the extradition of one, not because he didn't commit the crime, but because he was tried and convicted in absentia by a Russian court. Therefore, we should not recognize the validity of a Russian court judgment. The reality was we had our own evidence, so we gave him a trial in the United States and convicted him of murdering 20 million people with live witnesses, old people. 20,000. I keep saying 20 million. And the people who came were actual victims who were living and witnesses to his. I don't want to get the two cases confused now, but there were, I believe, in his case, that's Mikoski's. He personally several times executed the coup de grace with, and there were pictures of this with people lined up near the gravesite. They were shot, and I couldn't understand how. I mean, I understood that the sort of point that the Russia should send them back to the Soviet Union, but we didn't have the power to execute them. They had to be executed in the place where they committed the crimes. It was a perfectly valid execution, maybe the only execution that was perfectly valid by the Soviets. So this was a big battle in the Reagan administration. And eventually President Reagan overruled Buchanan, and we sent Mikoski's back. I argued the case twice in the Second Circuit, successfully. And the Supreme Court denied certiorari. Well, we sent him back, his family cursing me and Reagan. And the Soviets all of a sudden notified us shortly thereafter when he got back that they would give him a trial again, which if they had announced earlier would have completely solved the legal problem, because the court was wrestling with, can we, though we gave him a trial, even though he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and Judge Mishler had actually written an opinion saying he's guilty beyond doubt, is it right for us to send him to a communist country to be killed, even though he fits the criteria for extradition? And they decided, I think unanimously, maybe it was 3-2, I don't remember, but I do remember it was a close case. The Russians, and I had to deal with the Russians. God, but throughout this, I was trying to get the Russians to say, we'll give him another trial. The court would have accepted that. Okay, well, you give him another trial. Buchanan wouldn't, because the trial would be unfair, but the court would have accepted it. We go back, send him back. 2 days later, the Russian counterpart I had there calls me up and said, I don't want you to get surprised or angry, but we decided to give him a new trial. Well, that could have saved us like $10 million if they had decided it a year and a half before. An enormous amount of time of fighting. But the Russians, so I finally asked him, he said, well, we're not just going to let you push us around. Now, you know what the end of the story is, don't you? The guy died in prison. He just died. He was old now. He was like 80-something. I think he had a Russian heart attack, which is induced by something you drink. Now that is unfair. I do not know that. All I know is he died of a heart attack. There was a medical examiner's report, and nobody in my office believed it, because the Russians weren't going to try him again and spend all that money. No way.
Thanks for joining us, America's Mayor Live with America's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Please visit rudygiulianics.com. That's rudygiulianics.com to watch all and listen to all of the mayor's podcasts. Like and subscribe to our channels. Share with your friends, neighbors, and colleagues. and also subscribe. To
Oh, we
Mayor's-
got more time. I hate it when the show is at the end. How about asking me some questions about
10 minutes. Left.
football?
Yeah.
I'm
10 minutes
a
left.
big Giant fan, and I'm becoming extraordinarily excited because we're now in second place in the Eastern Division. We've got one of the better records in football because our division has a very good record. And to add to that, we get to play not this weekend, but on Thanksgiving Day, we get to play the team that is one game ahead of us, thanks to Ted's Green Bay Packers, who beat Dallas last week.
And tonight the Packers play, and then one question you can answer, Mayor, is kind of describe the difference between the Giants fan base and maybe Jets fans. New York City, there's 2 NFL teams. They play in New Jersey, of course, the Meadowlands. Maybe just talk to us about, growing up in this city, being a part of the city. For example, when you were mayor, did you kind of hide the fact that you were a Giants fan? Did you want to kind of play both sides, especially when you're running for election? Right?
I feel completely dishonored by Ted even thinking that I would play two sides. Do I look like a guy that played two sides?
No way, Mayor.
If I played two sides, I wouldn't have been suspended from the bar or any of that stuff. I mean, I don't do it. I just tell the truth. And then the people who can't handle it go crazy and nuts. So, no, I was a Yankee fan. I told them I'm a Yankee fan. I'm not a Met fan. And I was a Giant fan, and I told them I'm a Giant fan. I'm not a Jet fan. Now, here's also the truth. I'm not a hater fan. There are Giant fans that hate the Jets. There are Jet fans that hate the Giants. There are Yankee fans, not too many. Yankee fans are, there's a reason for that. The Yankees fans are self-satisfied and arrogant. I'm not, but a lot of them are. I know my fans. The Jet fans, the Met fans, rightfully are jealous of the Yankees. The Yankees have won 27 world championships. The Mets have won 2. They won 2. Or 1. I can't even. They won the one in '86. All right. I mean, that's 76. Wow. I put that ahead of a decade. 76.
2, 1969 and 1986.
Oh, 86. Right. That was right. 86. And then they had the big one. And I rooted for both. I rooted for both of them. I rooted for them both in both those World Series. I rooted for the Mets, and I rooted for them in the World Series. And look what happened in '73. Look up '73.
They lost.
It was before Ted was born.
Well, 1973 they lost, and they lost again in 2015.
And how many games did they lose in '73? They lost. They lost in a 4-3 World Series. They took Oakland 7 games, and their manager was Yogi Berra. Of course, you have missed. He's not good for this. He's missed the biggest, most important loss of the New York Mets in the World Series history.
What's that?
Against the New York Yankees, the Subway Series.
Oh, here's
The year 2000, the Subway Series. Mets Yankees.
I've got the wrong one on.
99.
I've got the wrong one on. I got 99 on.
Oh, it is 2000.
This is when we beat the. I think we beat the Braves in this one. I have the one inside at 2000.
Braves was
I'll wear it
96,
tomorrow.
right?
So the Yankees and the Mets met one time in a World Series. It was the year 2000, and the Yankees won it 4-1. And the only disappointment for the Yankee fans was losing that one game, because at that point when they lost that one game, I think they had won 12 World Series games in a row. In 1996, the second year that I was mayor, they played Atlanta. They lost the first 2 games to Atlanta, and then they never looked back. They won 12 World Series games in a row after that. They beat them 4-0, 4-2. Then they beat San Diego 4-0. Then they beat Atlanta 4-0. And then they won 2 in a row against the Mets. So that gave them about 14 in a row. And then the Mets beat them in 1 game.
Now, talk about basketball in New York. You have the Knicks.
Knicks.
And now you have the Nets.
Knicks.
It's basically a lot of Knicks
Oh, yeah.
fans.
My father used to take me to Knicks games when they played in the Armory on 23rd Street. Really great thing to watch because it was only held about 6,000 people, and you could virtually talk to the basketball players. And in those days, Madison Square Garden was the old Madison Square Garden, and when the circus was there, they couldn't repurpose it for ice quickly enough. So while the circus was there for that period of time, and I think during the dog show, the Rangers were evicted from Madison Square Garden, and they played in, which is a very large armory on 23rd Street, and you got a nice close look at them.
And of course, the two hockey teams, the Rangers and the Islanders. So basically every major sports league there's two teams in New York. So,
well, really, we have three in New York. If you think about hockey, we have the New Jersey Jets, the Devils, rather. Yeah.
And of course, they won the cup about 20-something years ago. So a big sports town. Why is this not as much of a college town, Mayor? I've noticed that about this town. Not a real big college sports town. I should say.
Couple of things.
Lots of colleges.
Yeah, I would say football went early. Probably the expense of having football fields. The football is not a big game in New York City because you need fields to play it. Basketball is much easier as an urban sport because it's just a little basketball court. But you'd have to go back to the 40s to find college football in New York, like Fordham, and that were very good college football teams. Basketball lasted for a long time. Got hurt very, very much in the 1950s point shaving scandal. City College, Manhattan College, Fordham, CCNY. These were all national competitive basketball teams, and really, I think because of the scandal, they kind of receded to not making basketball as big a priority and fell behind. I mean, two of them were Catholic colleges, and the whole idea of that kind of scandal almost destroyed them, Fordham and Manhattan. So that they de-emphasized their sports program. Although on a local level, meaning on the East Coast, Manhattan and Fordham will occasionally produce really good teams and get into the NCAA.
Just 2 minutes left, Mayor. Jeep Girl, one of our moderators, is going to fix dinner. I'm sure we'd love to know what Jeep Girl is making for dinner. So, Mayor, just a couple minutes left.
Could Jeep Girl tell us how she ended up? I mean, I notice on all of these, like Twitter and Facebook and Getter, YouTube. Everybody's got these funny names. So I mean, I know this isn't your family name is not Girl, and your first name is not Jeep. Are you Mrs. or Miss Girl?
Maybe, yeah.
I don't want to know your name because obviously you want to be anonymous. But can you tell us how you end up?
Can you drive a Jeep?
Yeah, you drive a Jeep. How did you end up with the name? That's an unusual name, Jeep Girl. And we'd like to know how you came upon that name. Let me tell you, the other group that always used nicknames was the Mafia. You always had to have a little space on your indictment for AKA. So Anthony Salerno, AKA Fat Tony, who actually changed his name midway in his career. He really had originally been Tony Fats. And during the midway in his career, I guess he thought it was more distinguished to be Fat Tony. I will tell you another guy. The guy who wanted to kill me put up $400,000 to get me killed. Probably because I irritated him because I always referred to him as Carmine the Snake Persico, which everybody referred to him as, including the Mafia guys, but never in his presence. In the presence, he had to call him Junior. He thought he was Junior Persico. Behind his back, he was the Snake. And he got angry at me because I convicted him, sent him to jail for 100 years, and then I brought him back to be prosecuted with his own. I convicted him as part of the commission. And then I brought him back to be tried with about 20 of his henchmen, his actual family. Because by doing that, the RICO case, through the commission, we were able to take a lot of their property. But a lot of the property was owned by the family. So by convicting the families of RICO, we not only put them in jail for a long period of time, we're able to take their property. And as a result of it, we took away the garment business, we took away the fish market business, we took away the private carding business, which is a multi-billion-dollar business in New York. Think about all the private carding from all those. You have to pay for that. That city doesn't do that. And we took away the Teamsters, we took away Las Vegas. And I missed probably half.
All right, Mayor, we're an hour in. If you have any closing words before we sign off until tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Well, I am surprised that I didn't get any questions about Donald Trump and Governor DeSantis and the race that's going on, or whether Biden is going to run. So we'll address those tomorrow. And I'm glad I didn't, because I know the former president and also the governor want the focus to be on Herschel Walker and Herschel winning, because there is a significance to that. And I'd like to use that as my final thought. Herschel Walker could use your help. The guy he's running against is a big phony. He's attacking Herschel for not being morally capable of being whatever. And the guy ran his wife over, beat the living daylights out of her, and believes in almost pure communist theory. Wants to defund the police. Would love to see families broken up, a la the Black Lives Matter. Supported Black Lives Matter. So you go with Herschel. Herschel's a decent man, a good man. Herschel will make sure that we vote for our values and we get to keep our children. You can be sure of that. These people want to take your children away from you now. So we'll be back tomorrow night. I hope you'll be back tomorrow night. And we always part by saying, God bless America.